Look, in any murder, there's always pressure on the police, quite rightly, to get a result. There's pressure from the public, there's pressure from your senior officers, there's pressure from all around you. This attack would have taken literally seconds. It was a frenzied attack. She was stabbed multiple times. It would not have taken long. He could have slipped across the road, killed her, and then just melted away with the rest of the local traffic, as it were, that was in the area at the time. We were left in a position where there was no forensic evidence or eyewitness in respect of the murder of Claire.
Police had little to go on. Unless someone could come forward, they were working off instinct. But their instincts told them the offender was someone she knew.
Claire was quite brave, and she's not someone that you would think of as a victim. So to then learn that there was no evidence that she'd fought the attacker made it feel like she must have known who it was.
People became apprehensive and fearful about things they hadn't been fearful about before.
Claire was such an ordinary kind of girl. It could have been my daughter, it could have been your daughter, it could have been anyone's daughter.
One parent actually spoke to me about his daughter's paper round and whether or not he ought to follow her at a distance.
Of course people in the area were worried. You know, parents would be more concerned about letting their children out, especially daughters, on their own. Of course it had an effect on the community.
I would never have gone out on my own again after that, especially not at dark. You would second guess where you would normally walk. There's always cut-throughs to places. Wouldn't have taken them never on your own after that. I still don't, actually.
The fact is, psychopaths haven't got a psycho or anything like it written across their foreheads. They can be normal, good-looking guys, families, children. Sometimes they're very difficult to find because they lead normal lives.
So police were looking for a violent killer. But they had drawn a blank, with no forensic evidence in the alleyway and no witnesses who saw anything suspicious. However, as the police trawled back through old files, they started to wonder, had the knifeman struck before? In December 1988, 5 years before Claire's murder, a 27-year-old was taken from her home on the grounds of Swain Primary School. A man forced her to walk to a nearby quarry where she was raped, strangled with a school tie, and then stabbed and left for dead. The abduction took place just a mile from where the body of Claire Tiltman was found.
These are not common crimes. These are very rare crimes, but we felt that there were so many similarities that, of course, they could be the same offender.
So police are working on the possibility that there is a serial attacker on the loose, prowling the local area. And his crimes have escalated from violent assault to murder. But they still have no idea who he is. And the community is balancing their fear with grief.
It seems a long time, actually, before the funeral. But the only thing I truly remember is her granddad at the funeral. When the curtains closed, he stood up and started shouting, "No, no, not my Claire," and then he fell to the floor. It was really hard to get your head around. And knowing that there were lots of police all dotted around, they were all watching everyone, it was so surreal, I can't explain it. It was actually quite frightening as well, 'cause you don't know who's there.
We filmed the funeral, And we went to the Royal British Legion Club where the wake was being held. Her mum and dad were ordinary people. And we interviewed Lynn and Cliff. They found it quite therapeutic to talk and express their feelings and their emotions. The thing that Lynn kept saying was that she'd had a premonition, a very strong feeling, that the murderer had been at the funeral. And they'd been scanning the faces of the people there, looking intently at them, wondering which of their friends, which of the people they knew from the community, which of them was the person who murdered their child. We got a call after the funeral from the police who asked us if they could watch the untransmitted footage that we'd filmed at the funeral, which I thought was a strange thing to ask for. We played them the tape, and they were obviously looking very, very carefully. So the detective sat next to me, and they were looking very, very carefully to see who was at the funeral. And there were little bits they asked us to rewind and play again, and they were making notes. They didn't tell us exactly why, but it did start to feel as if, you know, they were very interested in someone who was at the funeral.
Surely the knifeman wasn't brazen enough to attend Claire's funeral. If so, it meant that the killer was part of the Dartford community and could easily strike again. Kent is a county with more than 50 unsolved murders. These violent crimes include stabbings, shootings, and strangulations. But in the early 1990s, cops in the town of Dartford were wrestling with the violent murder of a young girl called Claire Tiltman. They thought the same offender could be behind another attack in 1988. And they were convinced he was local. But as time went on, the trail went cold.
I remember interviewing Claire's mum and dad on the anniversary of the murder. And there just seemed to be no progress with the police investigation.
The apprehension that it still existed was still with us in the school. Some of Claire's friends were seriously affected by the murder.
Things like nightmares, the horrific nightmares, they would stay with you all day the next day. You could shake, you could feel sick, you want to burst into tears or feel really angry about things. Those really raw feelings that you can't explain to people. Yeah, it's actually horrific what it can do.
It was very, very frightening, and there was a palpable sense of fear in the community. And then it happened again.
I was the area detective superintendent covering this part of the county, and had a telephone call in October 1995 to say that there'd been a stabbing of a young lady in the Greenhithe area. She'd have walked down here The attacker was coming in the opposite direction when he grabbed her, dragged her over to the other side of this bridge, where he then stabbed her several times and she fell to the ground.
The latest incident was under some arches, just 360 metres from where Claire Tiltman had been murdered. Had the Dartford attacker struck once again?
She was a very brave person because she clearly fought off the attack. You know, any one of these attacks, one vital organ, one stab wound to the heart could indeed be fatal. If it hadn't been for the fact that she was very quickly attended to by paramedics and in the hospital, I've no doubt that she could have been fatally stabbed. Fortunately, she survived. And obviously she was in a very poorly state. She was able to give a good account of what happened. She said, every time I screamed, he stabbed me, and every time he stabbed me, I screamed. So I thought, her words, if I stopped screaming and collapsed on the ground, perhaps he'll leave me alone. And that's exactly what he did do. I think the way she acted actually saved her life. I really do. I think he was determined to kill her. The area was immediately cordoned off. Forensic officers would have attended the scene. This area would have been thoroughly searched, both fingertip-wise and forensically. We were dealing with this in very quick time. The roadblock was set up, asking people, anybody who came into the area, whether by car or on foot, whether they'd seen anything, heard anything, knew anything. And it was as a result of that that we managed to very quickly get on to a person of significance.
An eyewitness reported seeing a car belonging to the local milkman in the area around the time of the attack. And police quickly identified him as a young man called Colin Ash Smith.
Colin Ash Smith was a milkman. Apparently he'd tried to join the army and had been turned down. If you didn't know him at all, there was no reason perhaps to think that he was particularly weird, just on the surface. He had a girlfriend, he had hobbies, he used to referee local football matches and that sort of thing. His mum and dad were very well known in the local area, the local community. His mum was a local Labour councillor. But if you did get to know him as neighbours or people, then there was something wrong. There was something sinister. He never went out unless he was carrying a knife.